Hey, 171 guys, continuing on our four-wheel drive systems, I want to cover a little bit more about the two different types of progressive couplers we talked about that you'd find in a transfer case. One is called a viscous coupler. Now, a viscous coupler is kind of an interesting device. It's a container, basically, of fluid. Sometimes they're external. They're not even inside the transfer case. They're in the back of a pinion of a rear differential, or even on the drive shaft in some of the little import dealios. But what a viscous coupler is basically, think of a container with the outer cover attached to one shaft and like an inner set of splines attached to the other shaft. And in there is a clutch basket, which is clutches and steels and all encased in this little housing. Now I can take both of those shafts and turn those in different directions, and there's a certain amount of looseness to allow me to transfer, differential, so the front axle can sweep further in a turn than the rear axle and not bind. But if I got into a situation where the wheels spun and there was enough difference in the speed of those two shafts, one shaft was spinning really fast and the other one was held still, what would happen is that viscous fluid, because of the clutches sliding through it, would actually create heat, and that heat would cause the viscous fluid to expand, and as the viscous fluid expands, it'll apply the clutches and engage both those shafts and take it right up out of the hole or the mud or whatever the heck you're in. So that's a viscous coupler. Neat little device. Unfortunately, back in the day, high failure rate. I think Subaru used a viscous coupler in some of their assemblies. When they fail, they would lock, so both axles would be turning at the same speed. I guess you could fail them to the point where they were open all the time, but usually when I got involved in them, they were locked and seized together, melted, and the two of those shafts would turn at the same speed all the time. You have a customer complain, they drive around a turn, the car would hop and it wouldn't turn easy in a parking lot. But that's a viscous coupler. Later on, and I think it was Dana, developed a hydraulic method for doing exactly the same thing. They just took a hydraulic pump and they were attaching one part of the pump to one shaft, the other part of the pump to the other shaft, and if the two shafts turned together, you wouldn't create any hydraulic pressure. But if they got into a situation where one part of the pump would turn and the other one didn't, the hydraulic pump would create hydraulic pressure, apply a set of clutches through a piston, and that would engage a set of clutches and make the vehicle go around and engage. So those are the two types of progressive couplers typically found in transfer cases. Okay. Other things you're going to find in a transfer case, you may actually find, if you take one apart, a planetary set. That can be used for two different things. A planetary set can be used as a center differential to allow the front and rear axle to turn at different speeds through a planetary assembly. And a lot of manufacturers will use the different sizes and parts of the planetary assembly to give you different torque splits between the front axle and the rear axle. Maybe they want 80% of the drive to the front, 20% to the rear, or whatever. They can do that through a planetary assembly. But in most cases, if it's a four-wheel drive truck and you see a planetary set, what they're using that for is to achieve a four-wheel low. So they're actually using a planetary set in a reduction application, giving you a lower gear, to get your truck the heck out of that mud or pull that wagon. A lot of people don't realize that if you got a four-wheel drive truck and you're pulling something that's really, really heavy, if it's four-wheel drive, even if your wheels aren't spinning, grab your transfer case, put your transfer case in low. If you got a 2.75 gear ratio reduction in the transfer case, you just took whatever your final drive ratio was in first and dropped it again to multiply that big number times 2.75, and that's what you've actually achieved. You've actually dropped your torque, dropped your gear ratio to a lower gear, and you get that torque multiplication. Man, I'll tell you what, you can pull a mountain. So I had a buddy of mine who was pulling a boat once. He was pulling up a boat ramp, and he couldn't get the thing. You could tell his engine was just struggling. It's like one of those guys that bought the big truck with all the stuff, but got the little tiny mini engine. And I told him, says, put your transfer case in low. He goes, well, put it in four-wheel low. And he goes, well, I'm not slipping. It doesn't matter. Put it in four-wheel drive. And the engine all of a sudden went revved right up. And I was like, what's going on? Pull that sucker right up out of the water. So for you guys, just realize if you got a transfer case, man, you got a super low gear there. You might as well engage it. So that's what you'll find in a transfer case. Another thing you'll find in a transfer case is usually a super huge chain. The chain over time, because it's always slinging in there, and nobody checks their transfer case fluid, in a lot of cases that chain will wear, and sometimes I've actually had them where they jumped. They actually jumped over the gears. They were so loose. So be aware that big chain in there is serviceable. But it's like a little manual transmission. You usually got a little fork in there. Sometimes the forks will feel not a lot of parts in there. You may find a pump, hydraulic pump, and all that hydraulic pump does is feed a little fluid up that planetary set, keeping that planetary set alive and feeding those bearings that are in there. But there's not a lot to a transfer case. Transfer cases are relatively easy to fix. Okay. Believe it or not, over the years, one of the things that I'm finding, especially with some of the older junk I work on, is a lot of the transfer cases are corroded. GM had an issue where they were using a magnesium cover on the transfer case, and they actually used fasteners that would corrode and rust, but the rust from the fasteners would actually eat away at the magnesium, and you'd get porous cases. A car would come in and, what's going on with your Jeep? With your truck? Oh, it's all out of fluid. All out of fluid. The transfer case the case is bad. It just leaked out, just corroded out. Salt and stuff would get into it. So, but those are four-wheel drive systems. Out at the axles themselves, at the end of the axle, depending on the year, model, make, you guys have heard of independent suspensions where they use like a center differential with a couple of drive shafts going down, driving the hubs so the hubs can go up and down. Some will use a solid tube rear axle or front axle. A lot of Jeeps will still, I don't think they're doing it anymore, but they used to have solid. My Jeep has got a solid front axle. Okay, but out at the axle assembly, heavy duty application rear axle assemblies. Typical 1500 series truck that's not heavy duty. The flange of the axle, which the lug nuts go through to hold the wheel on, that flange is what's supporting the weight of the vehicle, okay? And that transitions into a wheel bearing, and that wheel bearing goes down the tube. So if you put a bunch of weight on the vehicle, the weight of the vehicle is actually being supported by the drive axle you're trying to move the vehicle. In heavy-duty applications, that's not so good, because what will happen is that flange will actually break right off the axle. So what they do is they go to a full floating axle. Now, full floating axle, and you'll see this, there's somewhere in the book that actually shows a decent representation or picture of this. I think it may be in wheel bearings, but look around for it and find it. But what you'll find in those is what they do is they actually take the hub itself is on a big bearing that's on the axle tube assembly, and then the axle shaft that actually drives the wheel actually comes in from the outside and is bolted to the flange of the hub. So if you look at a truck and you look at the rear wheel and pop the hubcap off if it's got it, you'll see lug nuts going around the outside, and that'll bolt onto the hub. But on the inner center part, the little round part that the wheel goes over, the little round part, you'll see a flat flange with a bunch of bolts. Those bolts are actually holding the axle shaft in. So if you take those bolts out, you can slide the axle shaft right out of that truck and not even take the wheel off the car. So the axle shaft is just to propel the vehicle, not to support the weight of the truck. That's the advantage of those, like dump trucks. They put so much gravel in the back of a dump truck, they would break the flange off the back of that drive shaft. So they don't do that. They actually use a big bearing assembly on a hub, and that's all secured onto the vehicle. And then the drive axle is just a little shaft that goes through there and drives the wheel. So not little, but it's definitely not holding the weight of all that gravel they put in the back. So it's a full floating axle. So be aware of that. A couple sections in here you guys can go over. Talks about hub service. I want you guys to be familiar with that, obviously. And then there's other chapters that we did not cover in this class. Drive axles, U-joints. You guys all need to know how to do that kind of stuff, and that's covered in this book. So if you guys want to review that stuff for for yourself, it's kind of a good thing for you to do. So make sure you're getting on that. I'm just trying to get through as much as I possibly can with you guys, through the semester. It's been a difficult semester. I know you guys are, just trying to get things done, get things handled. Unfortunately, we lost a lot of lab time. I would have liked to do a whole bunch more for you guys hands-on. I will tell you guys, if you're back on campus next semester, this fall, and you've got some free time, come down and see me. We'll do some stuff in the lab. I want to make sure you guys can get your hands into this stuff. I mean, this type of training we're doing right now is great for us, some classes, but for what we teach, this has been a trying experience for all of us. We're going into some times, and I don't even know how to express it, but we're going into some times and we're not sure what's going to happen. They call it uncertain times. I don't know. So will we be back this fall? You know, we'll be all sitting in the training lab with masks on and gloves on or whatever, and doing this stuff. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. All I know is we're here. I'm here. You got my email address. I've got guys emailing me at 3 o'clock in the morning. They're shocked as hell, and I'm responding to them. But as soon as I hear my phone buzz, I got to see what the heck it is. But I'm here. If I can help you, let me know. Shoot me an email if you got any questions on anything. But basically, the directive came down to us to do as best we can to finish out the 7 weeks. I'm just glad we had the 7 weeks on campus. I couldn't imagine doing this for the entire semester. But I hope you guys got some stuff out of it. I'm going to put together a short video on how to actually reach the final exam and how to do the final exam. I'll probably put that together. I got to have my laptop and point the phone at the laptop. So I'll try to put that together and get it out to you. So. Again, this is Auto 171. This is part 3, I think, of axle service for this morning. So, okay, I'll stop it now, and I'll go load this guy up.